what are the, like, I see you're working majorly on migration.
Yeah, like not exactly migration, majorly not on migration. So I'm working on the engagement part of the company. So I handle all the engagement which happens through the mobile browser or web browsers. So I work on this feature which is being interacting through the browsers. Basically, the React part.
Okay, so technology wise, you're working on React.
React, yes.
So are you working on backend as well or only
No,
front?
no, not yet. Like I'm trying to get in the backend as well, but they have a separate team and they don't allow very frequently to work on the backend code because it is very like they want to make it separate from all the other teams
Mhm.
because any single mistake can cost the company a big amount of revenue.
Okay. So you are using React. So
Yes.
like, do you have hands-on on JavaScript as well?
Yeah. Like we use TypeScript plus React here.
Okay.
So we don't do JavaScript. Like we don't write code in JavaScript on a daily basis. But yeah, I have understanding of JavaScript as well.
Okay. Yeah. So based on your understanding, like, why do you think people want to use React instead of directly using JavaScript or any other framework?
Okay. So like if I'm telling about the framework, which we are like any framework, Angular, React, or any other framework,
Mhm.
this is much a UI interactive, or I can say a UI rich frameworks in that
Mhm.
we can get a lot of modules or we can get a lot of customizable options to make our components, our web browser web components very interactive or um, like much better presentable.
Okay. So that is why we use React.
So the main reason we choose React over any other framework is that React is just like in React we have single data flow. So it will be easier for any large scale application to debug if we have any issues.
Okay.
That's the main reason we use React here. Right now, the team we have different teams. One team is
Mhm.
migrating our code, like our old code, which is written on PHP to
Okay.
Next.js, and that team, like any feature they release, like that team, any feature release, they make sure that everything they make is on the Next.js server-side rendering, not on the not on the React.
Okay.
But the things I'm working on in the company is majorly work on the like React side.
Okay. And like, okay, suppose React has this one-way data flow, right?
Yes.
But Angular has two-way data binding. Then isn't that good?
So like when we have two-way data binding, the main problem with that is to check the flow of the data. So if we have a lot of components, which is like inner components, it have a lot of hierarchical components. So when we have two-way data binding, it will increase our dev efforts for debugging any issues.
Okay.
That is the main reason I can remember right now. We prefer React over Angular,
Okay.
and it is like the community is much wider of React as compared to Angular.
And what about the performance in React app versus the plain JavaScript app?
Okay, so performance wise, so like in JavaScript as well, the basic rules which we use to increase the performance of any application is same to reduce the major one is we can reduce our JavaScript's files, or we can like in React we can try to minimize the states so it won't re-render on every run,
Mm-hmm.
then reduces the image size or using a better format instead of JPG, try to PNG or AVIF or WPMP. It will also increase the performance because it will load faster on the browser. Apart from,
What,
Mhm.
yeah. What about lazy loading?
Yeah, so in React we have lazy loading as well. So we can show the a critical component which is important for a user first, and then we can lazy load our components which is not that critical, but it is important in some. like in the down the line. If
Okay.
the best example is for e-commerce applications, normally when we browse anything, the first thing we saw is the product photo, product name, and the price. We
Mm-hmm.
don't need the information of who's the manufacturer, when it is no, manufactured, built
Mm-hmm.
on the first page. We can show all this data on the other part of the, like in later part. So
Okay.
it will just help us to show, like with the help of lazy loading, we can show the components which is critical for a user,
Okay.
not to load whole application or not to load whole components which might it contains.
Okay. So, what are the drawbacks of using React?
Drawbacks of using React. Uh, Okay, so the main drawbacks which I can state with React is the states are the main drawbacks, like not states, the rendering of states. So in small application, they don't go for Redux because in Redux they have to like integrate the complete third-party library in Redux. So they
Mm-hmm.
use local storage or mostly states. So when
Okay.
anyone uses states in their application, every time any state value changes, it will re-enter that component if it is not a pure component.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever a re-entering happen, it will reduce the performance of that complete component. So if I'm rendering a component multiple times in few seconds, it will just like in not it will be not a optimal way.
Okay.
So that is the main challenge with React is if we have a lot of states which is changing very frequently,
Mm-hmm.
then it will be a like um, browser heavy or resource heavy thing to like interact or to make any changes.
So, like your site which you're working on, shadi.com, is very resource heavy, right?
Yes.
Then why do you use React then? Ideally, you shouldn't use, right? As per your explanation.
Okay. So like earlier they had PHP, like they've written
Okay.
all the code in PHP.
Mm-hmm.
Then React came. Then they migrated. Still, some part of the code is still in PHP, and they're migrating that code from
Okay.
PHP to like not React right now. They're migrating that part to Next. But earlier everything they have migrated to React, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're migrating from Next React to Next. Is it because it is a server-side rendering? It's not a client-side rendering, so
Okay.
it has a faster speed. It provides. It is a better SEO as well. It provides
Mm-hmm.
better SEO. So they are migrating from React to Next. So it's not exactly they are using framework just because it is like uh, resource heavy.
Mm-hmm.
They are planning to like they are still migrating that features or I can say the application components to the Next.js as they're finding that near the next framework is very fast as compared to the React modules.
Okay.
So in future, if something new comes in which is like stable and it has a very fast speed rather than Next, they might move to that framework as well.
Okay. Which version of React do you use?
17.2 exactly. That's a stable one we are using.
Okay. So it has hooks, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain what is this hooks?
Okay. So hooks are basically a functions which helps functional based component to access all the properties which a class component already have.
Okay.
So like let's suppose use state is hook which we use to set a state of any component, basic initial state, or we can update it accordingly. Use effect
Okay.
is also a hook which we use to mount our components when anyone first time render that component,
Mm-hmm.
and we can change that if we pass some props on that dependency array of use effect. So if
Mm-hmm.
anything changes on that um, any element of that which we have passed on that array, it will
Mm-hmm.
be auto rendered because use effect rendered every time when there's a change in the dependency array. But the first mountation, if we have to just mount our element, we declare our use effect and pass a empty array, dependency array. Apart from that, we have use context as well. So use context API people use when like normally everything in React is that everything here is a top to bottom flow. So parent, there's child, and there's a parent, child, grandchild. So if I have multiple siblings of a parent, then from parent I can pass all the components or all the properties, all the states to their multiple childrens. But if I have some property on children and I want to pass it to that children's sibling, it is not possible from context API. So we use Redux for that, but like we have context API as well to reduce prompt delay, to not pass everything on the child component. We just pass like we have a parent and then child and then grandchildren. We have set some values on parent component, and we can directly access with the help of context API. We can directly access on the grandchildren. So use effect, use state on context API. Apart from that, we have use memo. Use memo is also a hook which we use to memorize any value of any function. So sometimes it happens that we have a function or we have a logic which is the calculation of that logic is very expensive because it might use some API or some backend related backend expensive thing, backend expensive API which might be paid. So we remember that data with help of use memo and use it according requirement. Other one is use callback. So it also help us to memorize the whole function of that like memorize the whole function, not to we don't have to rewrite that function again and again. Like if we are using any timer and in that timer we are calculating some minutes so we're calculating hours, minutes, days from some value, it might be second. From second we are calculating minutes, hours, or days. So with help of use callback we can just use that logic again and again without um, writing that logic every time.
Okay.
Apart from this hook, we have what else remain? Useref as well. So useref is also a hook which we use to I can say mhm, to find any element in the current DOM.
Okay.
And yeah, like if I missed any hook name, you can just ask me. I can explain you what.
Okay. So we can create a custom hooks.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So have you created any custom hook?
Not recently, but yeah, I have gone through multiple custom hooks.
Okay. So which one would you think, like any scenario you faced where you thought, okay, custom hook would more sense?
Okay. So in my current, I was doing a story in my current company, and in that we have to get some information from user in a format of forms and drop downs, and then in the later part of while we are doing that story, we got the requirement from the business that we might use this form in multiple components, not only this single one,
Mhm.
and it has yeah, they were trying to get that component in the multiple tabs or multiple pages. So we have created a simple custom hook for that form that we can use that uh, hook whenever we need to access the same amount of form information.
Okay.
Apart from
Yeah.
that, when we were using we were creating a swipe functionality in
Mhm.
that as well. For we have created a custom hook in that like if I pass a component in that hook, it will be moved from like left to right or right to left for swiping functionality that is it.
Okay. Got it. So we talked about React, but we didn't talk about the virtual DOM, right? So can you
Okay,
explain me that?
sure. So virtual DOM is a concept which we use in React. It is like whenever any state changes, it re-enter the component, and the rendering process is heavily resourced. It takes a lot of resources, And if we change a lot of states very frequently, it will be very hectic for a user to see that a component is rendering, or it is like we have we might have some loader while we are entering the component. So that user might face a UI problem, or might face not a better. Okay, so that user might not like that rendering a lot. So virtual DOM is a rescue. It is like a blueprint of the current DOM which we are using. So changing in virtual DOM is very easy. It doesn't use all the resource. It doesn't use the resources which we have in the browsers. It's just a copy of our virtual DOM, of our current DOM. And whenever we change any state, it will update on that virtual DOM, and then it will compare that user has changed some state. He has clicked some button, or made some changes on some state. That change state is updated on the virtual DOM, and now that virtual DOM, they come like there's a process called reconciliation. In that, React compares that virtual DOM and the actual DOM. That if they both have the same states, it doesn't have any changes, it won't render that component. But if there is some changes on some specific component on the virtual DOM and the actual DOM,
Mhm.
then it will update that component on the actual DOM. So it doesn't update the whole component, it just updates the component which has been updated with the help of virtual DOM.
Okay.
This whole
So,
process is called reconciliation.
okay, so this reconciliation thing, don't you think it should take more time because it is comparing? Suppose you have a very complex application,
Yeah.
lot of UI is there, lot of state changes are happening. You click one checkbox, something happened. So React has to find out which thing to update, but it will keep on comparing from top to bottom, right? Okay, what change, like based on that it will re-render, right?
Yeah.
So don't you think this comparing on each update will take more time than directly updating?
Okay. So it will take time if we don't use the virtual DOM, because in virtual DOM we are not using the actual resources. The JavaScript engine of the browser that we use for like it created virtual DOM, and that is very fast, and it updates very fast as compared to use some resources. So or resources on the browser. So updation on the virtual DOM is very easy, and it doesn't take any resources. So updation on the virtual DOM and then comparing it and updating on the actual DOM is way faster than to re-enter the complete component on the React page.
Okay.
Because when we rendering the component on a React, on a web page, it will take resources. It might refresh the images. It might refresh all the APIs which we have already hit if we are refreshing a component. So it will take more time as compared if you are using virtual DOM.
What about immutability then?
Compatibility. Not sure about this. Like, what is the what is the reference you want to? What was you asking immutability?
So I asked the question like why virtual DOM is
Mhm,
faster?
mhm.
So it is in object that is fine, but still if you have 1,000 objects, the complexity will be more.
Yeah.
And so it will still be slower, right? At some point, it will still be slower while comparing, right? So that is where that immutability concept comes in. So it just React doesn't compare each one. It just compare the object references because these are just the nodes, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's faster.
Okay.
So let's, can you write one line like maybe var str equals to abc, string abc? Yeah. And now console.log str0.
str0. You want
Yeah, yeah,
something like this.
yeah. So what would it print?
So we are printing the zeroth index of that str. It will print a.
It will print it.
Yeah.
Okay. So come to the next line. Can you do str of zero, str of zero? equals to x, string x. Yeah, and now again log str 0, what it will log.
It will log when we are using var, it takes the reference of that. It takes the reference, so it will print str0, the first index 0a, and when we are updating 0th index with x, it will update to xabc and it will print x according.
Run the code.
Yeah, a second.
So why did it print a in fourth line? You changed in the third line, right?
Yes, but var is a loosely bounded prototype. So when we update anything on under var, it updates on a global level.
Okay. So if we use const, will it fix it? Let a const.
So if I use const and then update it,
Hmm? Or let.
so like in letter const we have a blocked space, so it has a separate memory block when we are using it. So, but in this case we are in the same block. We don't have multiple blocks. So if I use let here, but just let me think why var doesn't update to a. Var a we updated this thing.
Yeah, so basically it won't change as string is immutable, right? So ABC means it will remain ABC, right? So whenever you update, it creates a new
A
string.
new string.
Yeah. But if you do the same thing for object or array, it will work.
It will update. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so uh, related question. So in React, how do you update the state? Like what do you use to update the state?
Set state. Like,
Set state.
yeah.
Okay. So suppose I have a state in that count is 0 and I
Okay.
click the increment button, the count increments by 1, right?
Okay.
So in order to update the state, you would do set state, right?
Mhm.
Of count with the new value.
Okay.
But why can't I do like state.count equals to state.count plus 1? Why can't I directly update? Because state is just an object, right?
Yes. So,
Why I need to do
like
set
if
state?
you want me to tell you, sorry,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe
something
you
like
can
this.
write state equals to object count is to 0. I mean the curly braces. Yeah, count is to 0. Double colon 0. Yeah. Okay. And I want to update this count, right? So I'm saying, why can't I do that state.count equals to state.count plus 1? Why I need to use set state?
Okay. So if I do this, it won't, it will update that count, but it won't update on the UI.
Okay.
With the help of set state, it will update that state and it will render that component if there is some changes on the data.
Okay. Any reason why it won't update on the UI? Because we updated the state, right? Ideally, it should
Mhm.
update the UI.
As well. Okay. So if we have to update a state without using set state,
Mhm.
then
Yeah, I'm just saying why this doesn't work and set state works. Because ultimately, if you see, state is just a plain JavaScript object, right?
Yeah, which is
There is
updating a
nothing.
state.
Yeah, there is nothing React in this.
Mhm. It will fetch that count value 0, then update to 1.
Yeah,
But you are doing this on every click, right?
yeah. That handler is same,
Same.
and instead of calling set state, I want to
Okay.
do this.
I think it should work. I haven't tried.
Why set state then?
Why we use that state if it is working?
Yeah, if this works, then
I haven't think this through earlier, but yeah, this is a nice question.
okay. Uh, yeah. So what are the different types of components we can create in React?
Didn't get the question. Different type of components, like how?
Yeah, so functional
Okay,
components,
functional
simple
class-based components.
component. Yeah. So how do you decide which component, like which component type to use?
So, like in my organization, they have stricter us that we have to use only functional type of component. Earlier, everything was on the class-based, but now we are strictly using functional-based.
What are the differences between both?
Okay, so there are not a lot of differences in class and functional-based.
Mm-hmm.
The major one is like in class-based, we don't have to like use external hooks. They have already inbuilt functions for rendering, component bound, no, or component bound, or should component update. A lot of different lifecycle method. But in functional based, we have to use hooks if we have to update anything on the component.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, it's just like a preference for using class functional based.
Okay.
There's
So
no
why?
specific benefits of like there's no specific benefit of using class based or functional based over anyone.
So why did your company ask you to not write class-based components then?
Because might be functional based is very easy to modify or to like to work on. Because in class based everything is written on the oops level, and every I can say anything, any new functionality to like to add on class based is quite little bit difficult as compared to functional.
Okay.
Like if we have to create a state, so we have to first create a state, then bind it, and then use that and update that in class based. But in
Okay.
functional we can directly make with the help of use state, and we can directly update it.
Okay. So your React component is there, which makes some API call
Mhm.
and shows the data on the
Okay.
UI. So in like where will you place this API call in your component?
Inside the use effect, if it is placing that call whenever I land on that page,
So where will you place?
in the use effect component,
Use?
use effect component,
Use effect.
yeah, with the empty array. So it will like the first time when a user enter that page, that will API call like hit, and we'll get a response.
So what if user clicks on some button and we again want to call that? The component is already mounted. Now we want to refetch the data, suppose.
So we can, okay, so the one way to do this is where for this there might be some like the way you're saying there is a button in that if a user clicks it, it will refresh the data. So on that button click, we can update some state and
Mhm.
use that state as a value in dependency array of use effect. So whenever a value is changing on that button click, it will refetch like it will re-enter that use effect component and refresh the data.
Okay. if we are not using hooks, then how would have done in class space?
Like in class base as well, we have to use.
Suppose you're not using any hooks,
Okay,
then how would you have done?
in functional or in class. Like in class, we have all the lifecycle methods, so we don't have to use. We're not using class lifecycle methods.
Yeah, so which lifecycle method would you use to make the API call?
Which lifecycle method would I use? It would be mm, get derived state from props, static get derived state from. I'll use component did mount.
Component did mount?
Yeah,
Okay,
because in that we check that component is mounted or not.
okay,
So in component did mount, I'll place that API call.
okay,
Yes.
okay. So coming to the next one. So how do you do analytics in your application?
To track the number of
Yeah.
to tracking information. So they use Snowplow in my company. So we send some I can say tracking information on API. It will log on the database, and they'll use that logging values to track that if a user opens that tab, or if a user try to open a payment page, but it hasn't made the payment. So we use tracking information on the Snowplow to get all the new projects which we release.
So coming to this, right? So can you explain me this prototype in JavaScript?
Prototype in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Okay. So prototype is a way in that we can access someone else function property in my component, my object. So if I have an object in that there's a function written,
Mhm.
then I can use that function in my other object. I don't have to rewrite that function again and again. So if I have a function written on an object A, then I can use that function from object A to other objects by like using that values. If that function is using one or two values or multiple arguments, then I can pass that argument with the help of prototype, and then I can use that function of the first object into multiple objects.
So like why do we need prototype for this? I can use call or apply, right? Right? To call the function in my new object context. If I just want to borrow the function,
Number.
why do we need prototype? I can use the call or apply and still call the other object function using my current object context.
Okay. So, like, why we use prototype when we have
Yeah,
apply or call apply?
the scenario which you mentioned, function reuse.
Mhm.
So that can be achieved using call or
Call and
apply, right?
apply. So instead of like apart from borrowing, what else prototype do which call and apply doesn't have?
Maybe can you create one example showing the prototype usage?
Okay. So I'll create an object person in that.
Okay.
have a person two which has object name, first object, passing other object.
Is prototype a function? So can you reuse the full name function in person2 context using call or apply?
So if I have to use call or apply function,
Mhm.
then like the thing I remember about call and apply is that the same we can borrow a function, borrow an function from an object to another object, and the way of writing is the first object and then call, then from which no, no. The first object is the object which have the function, then then call, and then we pass the object in which we are going to use it.
Mm. Can you write that line?
Uh, According to but it will also say person have full name. Call is not a function. I'm not exactly remembering the syntax
Okay, okay.
of call and prototype right now because like I haven't used it from a quite time.
Yeah, so they introduced this arrow functions, right? So can you explain me what is like why did they introduce arrow functions? We already have functions.
Normal functions.
Yeah, why they introduce this arrow functions?
Okay, so if I have to give example,
Okay,
and let's suppose I have a button in that I have to make some on click. On that on click, we are doing something.
okay.
And if with the help of arrow function, I can directly make some action with on that button with the help of arrow function,
Mm,
and it will be making an arrow function on that click is we can like define that logic inside that button like inside the arrow function.
mhm.
Otherwise, if we don't have the arrow function, we would have to use a function call here. So if I have a const handle, or if I have to use function handle button, in that I have done some logic, then I would have to pass this function in that component. So it helps us, arrow function help us to make our components or make it use in the interaction or in the event in interaction, we can declare that we can define the function inside any event listener with the help of arrow function.
So you are saying we can't do with this normal function?
So
Like before arrow functions, we were writing click handler, right?
yes,
It was through normal functions.
yeah.
Then
So the main problem with this is that if I do this, it will run every time when a page loads this component. But we have to use our function or button click or any handle when we click on it, when a user interact on it. So with the help of arrow function, we can do that after a click, only after a click, that function will call.
I mean same thing I can achieve with normal function as well. Right, on click is a callback, right?
Yep.
It is not like it will immediately call. Whenever you click something, then it will call you a callback function. So if it's an arrow function or normal function, I mean it shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
The main difference I knew is in between normal function and arrow function is that we can write our code inside any component and inside the event listeners, but we can do that as well with the normal function.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your normal code, do you use only arrow function or you use
Okay,
normal functions?
so in arrow function we can make anonymous functions as well. We can directly make an anonymous function, and I can do that, and I can declare my logic here. But if I have to use a normal handler instead of arrow function, I have to declare a function name.
Can I not do inline function using the normal function?
Inline function will also work, but anonymous function won't work here.
So I cannot create anonymous function using
Inside,
old syntax.
you can create, but not inside of an event listener.
So why do you want to create anonymous function? The anonymous functions are bad, right? Because in your log they don't show up the
So
name.
where we have
Yeah. Then
got this
why would
interaction
you want to like why would they encourage creating anonymous functions?
for the security concern, maybe to
Security. Then how will you debug that?
yeah,
Suppose some click handler is not working and it is throwing error, but you
yeah.
don't know which function is it, where exactly it is blowing off.
It might be like just a preference of using arrow function apart from normal function, because we use both normal function and arrow function as well. So when we are making some event, when we make some changes on the events, we use arrow functions. Otherwise, we use handles when we have to make some callback operations.
Mhm.
Then we use like normal function, which is written in some part of the code, and we're using that as a callback, and we are using that.
Okay.
I can pass normal function via props as well,
Mhm.
and inside the components.
Mhm.
But arrow function, I don't think we can pass.
Okay. So let's come to another topic. So have you like do you know what is this higher order components?
Yes.
Okay, what are they?
So higher order components are the components in that we are using a function, like we are passing a function inside a function or returning a function from a function. Example, set timeout. Set timeout is a higher order function which takes a function and we are having some delay as well in that function. And like function inside a function is called higher order function.
So, like, when would you do that? Like, leave aside set timeout. Like, when would you create some higher order function? Suppose you are creating some utility,
Okay.
suppose like set timeout. Then when would you think that I want to use higher order function? That would make more sense.
Apart from set timeout.
Yeah, set timeout is inbuilt, right?
Yeah.
So why did they
Okay.
went with this approach, right?
Okay.
So suppose you are creating a utility of a lot of functions.
Okay.
You see your project is using this type of things a lot. You're creating a utility function and you decide, okay, this should be a higher order function.
Okay. So I'm giving an example. So let's suppose we have a list in that a user can select some products, and from that products, that person can add any item from that product to a cart. Then from cart, it will like the user will add his address from where he want to deliver, and then make a payment. So every step, so from adding the component from a cart to the complete payment, everything is interlinked. So if I have added some element of the cart, then the total amount of that cart, total values, total list, I'll need on the delivery page that this item needs to deliver this item needs to deliver on this page. So we use higher order functions mostly on those areas or scenarios where every action is dependent on some past action. So if I have the list of the from the list of all the items which a user going to buy, then I can use that component and pass into the next component which is calculating all the prices, adding all the delivery charges. Then after that, making a payment, we are passing that amount, that this is the total amount user is going to pay from their banking. It can be any bank or UPI or any cards. So when we have this chaining scenarios, at that time it makes more sense to use higher order functions.
Mhm.
Or like when we have to give control of our so like I have added some component, added some item on the card, and now uh, after after adding a card, I'll move to the payment section. So I'll pass my cart items to a function in that it will validate all the items which we have on that card, the quantity number. There might be a possibility that I have added some item to the cart, but after adding it, that item is sold out.
Okay.
So the function which is going to validate, it needs all the information from the last component. So we use IOTA function on those scenarios
Okay.
apart from set timeouts because it helps to make a function asynchronous,
Mhm.
anything asynchronous because JavaScript run on JavaScript is a single thread language. So with the help of this set timeouts or higher order components, we achieve asynchronicity.
Okay. And what about closures?
So closure is a way in that we can bind our function with its hierarchical properties. So if I have a function and in that I'm returning some function and the inside function is using some property from its parents, then whenever I use that return function,
Mhm.
I will have that values of that parent hierarchical direct parent or its above parent values because it is binded with the function. But using closure, a lot of closure is also not a good practice because every time we use closure, it stores some values on that execution, and it might be a objects, it might be a number of objects, it might be a big amount of data.